Hello and welcome back, and that is right, today we're returning to the subject of DIY NAS motherboards, something that we do talk about on the channel pretty frequently. However, we've not really spoken about it for the better part of half a year, close to 3/4 of a year, and a big part of that has of course been rising hard drive, SSD and RAM prices. However, now the peaks of some of those prices are behind us and we're starting to sift through the rubble and see that we might actually be able to bloody well afford something. A few of you have reached out and asked about DIY NAS builds into the second half of 2026. Now this video, just like the others, is focusing predominantly on NAS motherboards that are bundled together with the main CPU included with it, and in some cases including some RAM. In this video we're going to go through 5 great examples available right now of DIY NAS motherboards in MATX, MITX and even little tiny ITX. I've been researching across multiple screens and we're going to go through them. Now the first one that we're going to talk about, I would argue, is kind of the entire impetus for this video, and it's this one. This was the turning point. A lot of the other motherboards we're going to talk about I already knew about, but this one from CWWK or Changwon, a brand that we've already talked about here on the channel, we even visited their manufacturing plant. This is actually brought to my attention by another brand called Mini Root. We did like a little video on a little router box of theirs, but a lot of their products are made by CWWK, and this is CWWK's new board running on the N150 Twin Lake CPU. This manages to not only crank in 3 NVMe's, but it's got dual 10 gig network ports. Now that is a big deal. If we go down to the breakdown of the PCIe lanes there, you're able to see, bang, 2 10 gig network ports there. They are at ×1 speed each, and breaking it down into the individual blocks, each of the M.2 NVMe's is Gen 3 ×1 speed. All of the text there in red giving you some idea, running on the ASM1166 SATA there. So again, and that is 4 SATAs being delivered by the 8643 HD SAS connection and 2 standard SATA connectors there. Now again, at $298, it's a pinch more expensive than the board that we talked about in this video here. This was the single 10 gig version there. That was knocking around for about $200. But again, we're seeing them play with the form in what the N150 CPU can be bundled with. Here's another example. This has got both a 10 gig network port and 4 2.5 gigs. You've got a 10 gig for your priority traffic and 4 2.5 gig network ports there. So you've got your failover. You can set one as an out of bound if necessarily and corner it off depending on your software. But just generally, this board is starting to arrive on the scene via the likes of AliExpress and Amazon with its 2 10 gig NICs. I will say, when you do look at this board, if you do see it in this white configuration here, you're going to see it under different names. It's Changwon's, it's CWWK's board there. And again, running on a standard X550 controller. And it's just nice that they've not only maintained 2 10 gig NICs there, but also managed to pretty much add everything else, including an eMMC storage connector there, as well as an SD card slot there on the rear, a TF card even, and it even still has SODIMM on board. They've not even gone LP, something we will talk about later on in the video. Ultimately, this is a fantastic example of modern design of these newer generation chips that have only got 9 lanes to play with. Now, yes, it lacks ECC. Yes, it is modest as all hell, but for how much is getting crammed into this board and how that board that I talk about in here is still in operation in the other studio, I've got to got to call it what it is. This thing is a chuffing marvel. Sorry, and just before I forget there, the X550 controller there is running on ×4. So it's a Gen 3 ×4 lane. So there is sufficient bandwidth to allow full saturation of both of those 10 gigs. And yes, almost all of the boards that I'm going to talk about today will be in the studio within the next month or so we can find out more about them. Anyone else just noticed this super annoying light here? This is light reflecting off a window, bouncing off one of my rigs, bouncing off of the camera stick. There's not much I can do about this, but I thought I'd just point it out in case you think I've not spotted it. Next up, Erying. They are a brand that I've not really covered that much on the channel, but I tried to go up to their headquarters. It's only 2 blocks away from Ugreen's location in Shenzhen, China. Went up to the doors, knocked on, met a few people at the door, but unfortunately no one was really letting me in to talk to anyone there. They are a bugger of a company to reach out to, so do bear that in mind. And if you are watching this, Erying, Robbie at NAS Compares, get in touch. But this is a new MATX board from them. So with all of those disclaimers and all of that stuff there at the intro, I will say this thing is bonkers priced. That 345 Nikkei you're seeing there, that includes the tax. That includes 20% UK tax. You will have to factor in delivery, of course, because it won't be free for everyone. But let's talk about this ruddy bloody board. Rocking out with a 14th generation i5, already pre-installed. That CPU, when you break it down, has got 20 lanes to play with there. 14 cores, 6 performance cores, 8 efficiency cores, and 20 lanes to play with. It also has 10 gig networking there on the board. It is a larger MATX board, so again, if you want me to recommend a case, I'd probably say a Johnspo, like the new, maybe the N5 or even the N6. But this one arrives with multiple M.2 and multiple PCIe. They've swapped out the usual multiple smaller factor PCIe and therefore leveraged a lot more of the PCIe in M.2 more evenly. So for example, across them, you can see there are 4 M.2 NVMe slots there, 4 of them at 4x4, 1 at 3x2. Alongside that, it also has the 2 a physical times 16 slots, but I will say only one of them is actual times 16, the other one is times 4. Again, rocking out with pretty much everything you're going to need. It doesn't include the memory, but it does support up to 12 drives via 8643 connectors. Again, it is a decent board. And again, the 10 gig is combined with 2 2.5 gig ports as well. So there's your out of bounds and your failover taken care of as well. Now, keep in mind, memory costs, they ain't low yet. But I will say with UDIM support on there, you are going to have to spend a little bit more on available memory. UDIM generally is knocking around for a higher price than SODIMM at DDR5 level, at least at the time of recording. And alongside that, I wouldn't dare run this without a decent CPU cooler on board at this scale. It isn't like the board we just discussed. It includes the cooling ball bearing combination, passive and active cooling system included. You are going to have to get hold of a fan alongside this. But at 345, including tax, this is a great larger scale board, particularly for those larger cluster deployments as well, but just keep scale both across the board and in terms of height once you put a decent cooler on there in mind. Next up, let's get weird. This is a micro board that's rocking an AMD Ryzen processor there and 2 10 gig ports and 2 NVMe ports and 4 NVMe slots. But more importantly, it is not an MITX. This is the even smaller ITX variation there. So again, this is a compact as F board we are talking here. Now, right now, you can get a hold of it, again, 351, including the tax on AliExpress there. And again, that's without delivery in the UK, but again, depending on where you are in the world, things change. Now, again, that is 2 10 gig ports and 2 2.5 gig ports. So there are going to be those of you thinking this is a router board, but with 4 M.2 NVMe slots. This has got some great flash storage potential. It is crammed in there, let's be honest, it is mega crammed in. And also, you may have noticed that the M.2 NVMe slots, they're not including the Wi-Fi card slot there or a 4G SIM slot there if you want to put in an adapter. So it's a neat little enthusiast board. I'm not going to call it mainstream because it's taking advantage of the micro format. Also, you're not going to have to think about like your power supplies. It does power on an external PSU, which is not for everyone, but I will say it can be useful for those more compact deployments. Say, I don't know, you want to hollow out a PlayStation and use that chassis. That's something you can do for those real DIY modders that want to knock around. And it's another board that takes advantage of SODIMM. Unfortunately, this is going to be one of the last of those that we talk about here on the video, but again, it's pretty much got everything you're going to need, including chuffing Oculink and USB 4. So it's a compact board that's going to have huge expandability towards external GPU, external PCIe, external storage, and if you're going to use something like Zimmer OS, the potential towards direct USB connectivity. Though bear in mind, This is based on AMD architecture, not Intel, so I don't know if ZimmerOS includes the drivers for USB and Thunderbolt direct pass-through in the way that it does for Intel systems. Now, it's the 8845, the non-Pro processor, very important because the Pro supports ECC, this one doesn't, but it's still got 20 lanes of Gen 4 architecture to play with and a huge amount of RAM support there. And that extends across the other CPU configuration in the Ryzen 5. There are 2 CPU options that you can choose from that you can directly buy from Topton. Again, Topton is kind of connected with CWWK, I think it would be fair to say. But regardless of the CPU you choose to go for, they're both banger processors for server utilization from AMD. The last 2 boards, by the way, we're going to talk about are Intel, but still, these are a cracking pair of CPUs to choose from in, frankly, one of the most overburdened compact Mobos I've ever seen, and yes, I'm buying one. Next up, we return to Changwang or CWWK. This is technically 2 NAS motherboards, but I will say both of these, although they are more on the expensive side, it's now where we start to see, alongside more AMD Ryzen pre-soldered, pre-attached NAS motherboards, we're now seeing more Intel Ultra. And for those looking at local AI deployments, I know not everyone's into AI. Come on, OpenClaw, stop making so much sodding noise. It has to be said that there is still a huge amount of capability to be discussed here. Now, the first one here, taking advantage of the 125, the 155 and the 185H Intel Ultra processors there. This one, again, is not cheap. By the way, it's not the most expensive board we're going to talk about today. However, what you get with it is kind of insane. Now, for a start, as you can see, a breakdown, we have got 2 M.2 NVMe's at 4x4. We've also got a 10 gig network port. We've got 2 5 gig network ports, and we've still got a 2.5 gig network port just for the hell of it. We've also got support of USB 4, direct connectivity, and a Gen 4x8 PCIe upgrade slot. And again, this is a SODIMM model list. There's still no pre-soldered memory. Stay tuned for that. There is just a lot packed in. And again, this is MATX. It's not that micro board, but at the very least, it's not the massive one there. But it's that price tag at $557 that I know is going to put some users off. Because once you go down the DIY road, there's a feeling a lot of the time that pre-soldered motherboards should sit at the sub $500 mark. I get that, but times change, inflation happens, and RAM shortages are a thing. But arriving with support of up to 12 individual storage drives there alongside the M.2s already covered. There's a lot to love here. But if we scale up, this is why I said it was 2 boards, then you've got the 225, 255, 285. This is 1 gen up. Now, you may have already noticed not only that price tag, which is effectively double what we just discussed, but the fact that it arrives with RAM. Because at this point, we have to discuss the icky subject of pre-soldered RAM. A lot of us don't mind getting a motherboard that has a CPU pre-attached. It's easier. You're getting CPUs that you can't buy off the shelf, and it's already pre-made for you and sometimes pre-burnt in. But memory that's fixed can be a dicey subject on DIY. I'm aware of that, notwithstanding the fact that you can't upgrade, but you also can't downgrade. You don't have a choice of the RAM. And this is rocking out with 16 gig LPDDR5 chips all the way around. So you've got 4 of them built in for the 64 gig model there. Don't worry, we'll be getting bigger later on. But apart from that, the architecture is largely the same. We've got those 12 SATA drives. We've got 12 SATA via 8643 connectors. We've got the Gen 4x4 M.2 NVMe's, 2 of those. We've got 2 Thunderbolt port connectors there. Again, it's largely the same board, but scaled up in a number of ways, and of course, factoring towards that additional pre-soldered memory there. Also, it changes in terms of network connectivity. They've gone directly into 10 gig networking rather than differentiating between those other ones with the 5 gigs. But again, it is a double price there. But once you start factoring in the price of memory, and we will come back round to that, because it has come down a pinch, but it ain't going to be quick as it comes down. There are savings to be had. A great example is the fact that earlier this month, and we're talking about it next week, at least at the time of recording, Ugreen's Kickstarter there for their AI NAS. The CPUs I've discussed so far are the exact same CPUs that this brand has factored into their NAS systems currently on Kickstarter. A Kickstarter, I might add, that is selling gangbusters right now with that same architecture. And look at some of these prices, many of which have already sold out there. So I include this here to give you some sense of perspective about the prices I'm talking about. And yes, that doesn't include the storage, but then neither does the Kickstarter there. This includes the CPU and the RAM and an OS drive in the case. Yes, you're going to have to buy those, but I just want to give perspective. By the way, what? 8.7? We're going to talk about that in the video next week. But ultimately, if you are someone that is looking at these Intel Ultra AI boosted CPUs, this is a great couple of motherboards to talk about. We will close out on a more expensive one shortly, but there's a lot to love. There's still no ECC support, which I know will annoy some users, but with plenty of lane architecture to play with, plenty of RAM capabilities, although prefixed in most cases, there's a lot to love here. Ultimately, if you are prepared to put the money down and you're thinking long term, these could be good options for you. If you were someone that was considering the Ugreen NAS kit crowdfunding, but you thought, you know what, I can build something for myself that's better, this is how you could put your money where your mouth is. And finally, we end on one that we include half seriously and half for just gits and shiggles. This is an AI Max 395, that AMD Insane CPU. The one that's currently being used in AI systems, currently being recommended and utilized in the soon-to-be arriving Minis Forum N5 Max system there. This is that on an MATX motherboard with 10 gig out the gate. Now, that price tag, let's be honest, is when things get a bit insane. Because at this point, you're like, if I'm building my own for that kind of money, what is my budget? What am I putting this towards? Now, number one, yes, this is another motherboard that includes the RAM, but my God, it includes a lot of it. 128 gig of DDR5, and that is DDR5 at the Billy Bonkers speed. Again, that's 8,000 mega transfers per second NAND at 16 gig blobs. They're on the board alongside that CPU, also arriving with 10 gig, but weirdly just one 10 gig NIC and one 2.5 gig NIC, which is kind of weird Lord taketh, Lord giveth situation here. Alongside USB 4 connectivity there, the board also arrives with pretty much all the other connectivity you're going to need, but it doesn't have a PCIe upgrade either, so you're going to have to look into USB 4 upgrade slots. Again, apart from that, M.2 NVMe support is pretty moderate. It's available across a few different platforms, and although that price does seem rather intimidating, I will argue that is probably the lowest price I've seen for that board thus far. Again, we're seeing it integrated into pre-made systems largely because that price for most people is just, intolerable in some regards. But it is still an incredible CPU that multitasks beyond that of a number of CPUs that we talked about so far, whether it is towards AI, towards pretty comprehensive VM deployments there at the compact frame. But alongside that, when it comes to the M.2 connectivity there, so we go along, we've got two M.2 NVMe slots. The SATA connectivity is where things sort of wind up ever so slightly, because you can see it there on the board. There's an 8643 connector on the rear. It is a real quirky turkey of a board, and I don't quite know precisely the design philosophy for it, but with so many people talking about this sodding CPU for the better part of 6 to 7 months, I did think it was worth including. And again, bear in mind, we are seeing more and more systems rocking out right now, not only with that CPU, but with the RAM already pre-installed. I believe even Minis Forum are going to rock this out with 128 gig pre-solded. And once you look, even now at prices that have peaked, it's still a lot of money at 128 gig when you're looking at modules here where 16 gig is 200. So you're already looking at close to 800 to $1,000 of RAM included on that board, which can make that price a little bit more palatable if you were going to scale up to 128 out the gate, but many of you weren't. So I get it if this is not going to be for everyone. However, this has been 5, technically 6, motherboards for NAS DIY that I would recommend right now in the first half of 2026. Again, it's great to return to this subject, and I hope prices become a bit more affordable. Needless to say, all of the boards I've discussed are linked below. Those links are affiliated. We do get a commission here on the channel if you use those links. So using them, only do so if you found the video helpful, and only do it if you actually want to buy the thing that it is linked to. But thank you so much for watching. Thanks for supporting what we do, and I'll see you on the next video. There should also be an article below over on NAS Compares very, very soon.